All right. I think it's time to get started. Hi, Jutta. This is
Hi,
Deepthi.
Dipti and everyone.
And I'm really, truly thrilled and honored to have you here with us. This series is called Agility A2Z, which is basically exploring all the paths to agility. What is Agile? How it started? And so we are honored to have you on this inaugural session where we want to know what is Agile, how this whole Agile revolution started. As much as me, Sumiti, and Purva, we brought some elements wherein we talk about textual Agile. We want to understand from you how this whole thing started. We heard of Snowbird. What was that? Who were those 17 people? I do have some photos from internet, but let's hear it from you, someone who has been into that circle and has been there since this whole revolution has happened. So thank you, Yuta. Starting, to knowing about who you are, how do you know all these people, and to what do you know about them? Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dipti. Well, probably it starts already like with your questions, kind of where am I coming from? So my background is actually in software development, and there I had been in mainly two communities. So one was patterns. So most of you probably have heard of design patterns, so the Gang of Four book and so on. And the other community I was in early on, and we are talking like mid-90s here, so it's really, well, I'm sorry, I'm a bit old, a bit time ago. Yeah, and the other community I was in was Smalltalk. And it actually is that those two communities, or let's say those two technologies, are actually the pillars of Agile. So they're the foundation of Agile. And if you look at what has started and when, so it started in, well, I heard the first time about that was in '97 at a conference called OOPSLA. That was at the time kind of the key conference where a lot of new stuff was created. And in '97, there was on the one hand the experience report of Kent Beck and his and some of his colleagues like Chet Hendrickson and Ron Jeffries about the C3 project, so the Chrysler project. And this was when they kind of tried XP or created XP. And on the other hand, a workshop that I attended, there was a guy reporting from how he was using Scrum. So that was kind of my first encounter. Also in, well, and actually this is my first encounter, and because of I have been in these two communities. Now, looking again at these kind of the first key methodologies, approaches, that was XP and Scrum. Both have been created by people who were Smalltalk programmers, and both approaches have first been described as pattern languages. So they have been formed in terms of patterns, and I just looked it up for this talk. So XP was written up in '95 and first published then in '96 by, maybe that's a surprise, Walt Cunningham. So not Ken Beck. So Walt Cunningham was the one who wrote the patterns, and the pattern language was called Episodes. And well, I also brought the books with me. So this is, where do I need to bring it? Pattern Languages of Program Design, #2. So there was one beforehand. And this is where XP was published as this program, as this pattern language. And a few years later, that was in '99, Scrum was also published as a pattern language. And also this was the first occurrence of a publication. So really that it was published somewhere. And that's the, let me see, well, if you can see that. So that's the one, and that's the, oops, #4. So that was written up in '99 and published in 2000. So this is where Scrum then came up and was shown. So, and because I had been in two of these communities, I kind of was naturally aware of that because we were talking about the things that were going on in the patterns. So I also I think it was in '98, I was conference chair of one of the patterns conferences. And so it was more, yeah, again, a natural thing for me that I just knew all those people and have been part of that. Now, I don't know. Shall I just move on, or Dipti, you want to ask something else? I don't know.
No, no, this is interesting.
Okay.
I had my plans to interfere, but you know, all that you're sharing is way beyond my knowledge. So thank you. Yeah.
See, see,
2000.
yeah.
Beyond, I
Yeah, so that's cool. So so again, so these were the two pillars. So a bit later on, it was actually lean that came in as well. So there was this new product development game, that article published in the Harvard Business Review, that was published already in '86, but it was discovered kind of by the Agile people later on. And I really put this in quotes because at the time, the term Agile wasn't coined for that kind of thing. At that time, we were talking about lightweight methodologies. And now coming to maybe right away to like the Snowbird Utah thing, the meeting where the Agile Manifesto was created, actually, well, there were a few attempts to make that happen. So a few invitations went out, kind of as we know it as well. So we often try to make something happen, and then it doesn't work, and then we do another try and another try, and then maybe the third time it really is happening and we get a crowd. So that's kind of what happened there as well, which also had an effect that not everyone who was in the first round thought of being a participant in that thing was then later on really there because, well, people had schedule conflicts and stuff like that, right? And well, nobody knew in advance what will happen. That's the other thing, you only know in hindsight. So, and the idea or the reason of the people getting together there was really to have maybe a better argument, or you could even say putting more weight in terms of where we are, who we are, and that we are existing, more weight to these lightweight methods compared to the heavyweight, which is called the waterfall. So, and then also people said at that time, it's probably better if we join forces and not fighting over each other's methodologies. Is XP better than Scrum, than Crystal, than Adaptive, than FDD, than DSDM, and so on. So there was a lot of stuff out there. But people said, well, it's fine that we have all these different things, yet we kind of need to find a common ground so that we have this better argument, which is really weighing in again against the waterfall.
So I have
Yes.
a couple of questions here because that's where, you know, we all know everything. We all know, or
Sure.
of course actually don't know about that as well. That is the intention of the session. So we know things after 2001 onward. And so what I really got today was lean is also not very far away from Agile.
That's true.
And so it just happened that lean happened in manufacturing, and please correct me because that's my understanding and that is what I wanted to know. So lean started with manufacturing, and wherein Agile, a lean way of software development, happened with software development only. So
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's
yeah, so that's correct. So lean started in manufacturing and it started in Toyota. So people also refer to this as the Toyota way, which is kind of a separate approach. And then it was mainly Mary Poppendieck, who was in engineering with 3M. So 3M, probably most of us know 3M mainly for, well, I'm not sure if I have really nice ones, I don't, but like for the stickies. So 3M is kind of the creator of the stickies, which was only a side product. So they are really in engineering, mechanical engineering, and it was kind of an accident that they also invented the stickies. So it has nothing to do with the lean thing. However, but because Mary was in 3M and in engineering, she knew about the Toyota way. And then after she retired, and it was really only after she retired from 3M, she then took what they have done there and transformed it to like lean software development. And then if you now think, well, there's a lot of other stuff there. So like Kanban came much, much later. So that wasn't even present at the time when the manifesto was created, right? So I don't know, is there a follow-up question, or otherwise I would just move on? Yeah. So again, the point was to have a better argument against the waterfall, the heavyweight thing. And now I want to show you something. So I want to share my screen at this point. And oops, no, this is not what I wanted to share. Let me try again. Here we go.
You're sharing.
So,
I will encourage audience.
Yeah. So this is what I wanted to share. So this is actually, you might see at the top here, if you see my mouse, Royce 9070. So at the top it says Royce 9070. And so this is the original Waterfall paper. So that's the paper where Waterfall was kind of defined the first time by a guy called Winston Royce. However, and so you see this in that, well, I just see, you don't see it. Do you see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you see it. Okay, good. You see it in that picture, so kind of the classic waterfall. But now the surprising thing maybe comes, and I've highlighted here. Mm-hmm. So Winston Royce says here right away, well, I'm paraphrasing, this is not a good idea and it won't work this way. It might work in some cases, but typically it doesn't, because you will encounter some problems later on, and then you need to find a way to put it back in. And so the paper goes on, so it has 11 pages here. And finally, he comes to a thing like where he puts feedback loops in everywhere and also says like, well, you just can't do it this way. It would look nice, but actually, sorry, it's not working. So that's maybe also interesting, because most of the people, also those who are actually using Waterfall, they have never looked at the original paper, and that it was never meant to be used that way. So that's maybe interesting as well. So people often don't know that. Okay, anyway, people used it at the time a lot, and therefore, again, repeating myself, those lightweight guys came together in Utah in order to find their better argument and find a common ground, right? And now I want to look into that. And I know that you have seen parts of it, or probably, yeah, Dipti?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Will it be correct to hate Waterfall the way, Agilists go on bashing Waterfall and they talk about evils of Waterfall? What is your opinion about that? I truly want to understand that as well before we get into Snowbird.
Well, the thing is, the way people understood the Waterfall, I don't think it's working. So I'm with the originator of Waterfall, with Winston Royce. It's just because the way people understood it, they are not using it for allowing the feedback to be built in. However, if people would actually read the paper, then they also would understand, again, that it was never meant this way. And if they would use it the way he intended it, well, it's a little bit, I would say it's complicated, because he has these feedback loops in every little thing, and then it goes up the whole loop back, and so he has many loops in there. And also, even like at I think the third thing, he starts even building code, kind of prototyping, and then feeding that back in. So it is still much slower than what we know now, but still, if people would have understood it this way, I guess probably Agile wouldn't have been needed as extremely or as badly as it was needed at the time.
So I have then another question, although I am sure you will recommend us to go through that paper, and we definitely will after the session. So the other question is, then what is waterfall useful for? I mean, the way he has explained, what is utility, you know, and let's say we have incorporated the feedback loop into it, then what is its utility? We know what is the utility of Agile. I mean, I'm not going to mention this on behalf of everyone, because I understand there must be a lot of people who are here just to understand what is Agile. But yeah,
Yes.
there is feedback loop, then what was its utility?
Yeah, well, I find it really difficult to answer in that sense that, well, it will probably work for some kind of product developments. However, I would always prefer an agile approach, and actually just because it lets me sleep better. And what I mean with that I get with agile, I get like immediate feedback on the real thing, and therefore I know exactly what the status is and I can act on it. And the news might be really bad, but I want to know it as early as possible. And with all the feedback loops built in, well, you know it, but it just still takes a little bit longer time if you use that waterfall, which is really clumsier, even with all the feedback loops built in. So even if I don't have the need, like I know kind of the requirements will change or whatever are the typical things, still, whenever you build something new, you never know what kind of problems may show up, and you will know about them if you are really working in an agile way. So that's my answer to that. Yeah,
Makes sense. I in fact had a follow-up question that people feel that Agile is good for startups. Agile is good for the situations where we are, discovering, we are exploring, and but waterfall is very much applicable to enterprises. Do you think that's a correct statement? It's for big. It's for
I don't think so. No. And actually where I'm coming from is actually way more from enterprises. So, which is the reason, I'm not sure how many people know about that, but I published my very first book in 2004, and it was about scaling Agile. So at the time in 2004, most of the people just started using Agile in a small team, and they haven't thought about scaling or anything. However, my background always was like the corporate environment and the enterprises, and therefore I disagree. And again, it is even, or especially then, if you are in a large enterprise, the risk is so high that what you are working on will be maybe also not the way you want to go, but then it costs you a lot of money to correct the cost because so many people are a part of the whole development. And so it's just too expensive. And therefore you want to have feedback as early as possible in order to know where you are heading and correcting the course before you have spent all that money.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's move on then to the manifesto. And actually, so you see the manifesto, I believe, right now. And I don't want to focus on this part at all. So there are a lot of people who know that, and so maybe this is even boring. However, I think it's super important, and I hope it will be covered later.
Yeah.
What I want to cover is this part. So I want to look at the people who had been there and why were they there and what did they bring.
I have the group photo. If you will allow me, I'll later show it.
Yeah. So looking at who is there, well, of course, the one thing is it's men only. So it's not really a diverse group.
I was about to ask you. Yes, I was about to ask why.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and actually, let me go to that a little bit later as well. Then also, it's not only male only, it's also of the 17 people, there were only one and a half people, sounds weird, who were not from the US. So there was Arie van Bennekem, who is Dutch, he's from the Netherlands. And then there's Martin Fowler, who is original from the UK, but even at the time he lived in the US for quite some time. And that's why for me, he often counts only as a half non-US person. So really not a diverse group. However, now looking at who is there. So we have a really kind of a big group of people from the XP ground. And the reason is kind of obvious because at the time, XP was the big thing. Scrum wasn't really used much at the time. That people started to use Scrum more, I would say, like in 2005. So really sometime after the manifesto was created, but before the manifesto was created, it was mainly XP. Okay, so we have with XP, first of all, of course, Ken Beck. Now let me go down that list here first, then Walt Cunningham. I mentioned before that he was the first one publishing about that. Then Martin Fowler is also from the XP field. We have, of course, Ron Jeffries. Then we have Robert Martin. And I would say this is it. Then from Scrum, we have Mike Beadle, we have Ken, and we have Jeff. Then looking further, I now follow the list, I guess. We have here Arie van Bennekem, the Dutch guy, and he represented DSDM. DSDM is kind of similar to XP. It's a British thing, and the main thing is that, well, there are two major things, I would say. One was that they try to have a connection to prints early on, which is also a kind of a, like in an enterprise certification thing. And on the other hand, what they also had, which I think still is very cool, and I believe nobody still has that, is that they implemented right away feedback on DSDM. So whoever used it was invited or almost pushed to providing feedback, how it's working for them and what needs to be changed in order to serve them better. I see there are some questions, but I would like to go through the lists of the people first, and then I go to the other questions.
Of course, yeah.
Then we have Alistair Coburn, and Alistair came there with the Crystal methodologies. And what's interesting about Crystal is that Alistair was, I would say, the first one who encountered that whatever lightweight methodology is used, it will change depending on how many people are involved. So again, speaking of scaling, and so he used a color scheme to reflect that. So it starts with crystal clear, which is for one team only, a small team. And then it goes through crystal orange, crystal blue, and what was the darkest color? Maybe it was in black, I don't know. However, the problem, so he understood that. However, the problem was he only described crystal clear and crystal orange. So the darker ones, which were more like enterprise and scaling up and so on, they haven't been described and defined. The only thing are red and brown, thank you. But the thing was he realized that there must be a difference. Now, I want to, although I mentioned Walt before several times, the one thing that's really interesting, and I only learned about this, I believe, 5 years ago. So talking with Walt about what happened there in Utah, and he said, you know what, I wasn't on the invitation list. However, people at the time organized that meeting in Utah using the wiki, and Walt Cunningham is, I don't know if everyone knows that, he invented the wiki. So the technology you know from Confluence or Wikipedia and all of that, the technology of that was invented by Walt Cunningham. And at the time there existed worldwide exactly one wiki, and that was the wiki from Walt. And so people organized the meeting there, and Bob, just because it was his wiki, he saw that and he put himself on the invitation list. That's what he told me. That's a funny story, I thought. Okay, now moving on a bit here, we have over there James Grenning, and I want to put him together with Brian Merrick. So these are the two people who are resembling everything around testing. So they have been invited because they were kind of way ahead of everything that's happening, that has happened in the testing area at that time. So that's the reason why they were there. Then we have Jim Highsmith. And Jim Highsmith has had a lightweight methodology called adaptive software development. So this is what he brought with him, which is actually still, I really like that, because also how it sounds already, it is super adaptive, and it's also one that's really great to use also in the enterprise. However, what you also can tell for like Crystal or adaptive and so on. So whenever there wasn't like a big certification body, people didn't use it later on. Okay, moving on. So then we have Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas. They are together, and they are, and you might know them, they're from the Pragmatic Programmers. And so, which is kind of like XP, and it's more detailed extreme programming practices. And so you could also kind of count them into the XP field, but they had their own little bubble, which really went along quite nicely with XP. What's also interesting with Dave Thomas, we always had and still have another Dave Thomas in the community, often referred to as Big Dave. And he was on the invitation list. Actually, he was one of the hosts from the very beginning, but when they settled on this date, he couldn't make it. And a lot of people still think that the other Dave Thomas is the one who is on that list. And well, often people don't know. And it doesn't really matter, because theoretically, by what he offered, he was also part of that group, although he wasn't there in person. Okay, now moving forward here, we have then here John Kern and Steve Meller. And those two guys, well, they have different things, but they are both from the analysis and design space. So at the time, well, the cool kid on the block was object-oriented programming, and there were people who said, like, well, if we are programming in an object-oriented way, we also need to do analysis and design in a different way, also in order to keep up with the speed that OOP allows us to do. And so they had their little methodologies, or even big ones, whatever. So Jorn Kearns, he worked together with Peter Code. I'm not sure if people know him. So that was called OOAD, and Steve Meller. So there the method was called Schleer-Meller. Okay, let me see. Did I forget anyone? No, I think we are through the list. Now, one thing, what I still want to say here, if you look at that list and also how I started, like, it's not really diverse. There are at least two people who are super clearly missing, and I have no idea why they are not there. Maybe they also couldn't make it, so I don't know. Or they have never been invited. I really don't know. So there, remember when I started, I said in 1999, Scrum was first written up as a pattern language, then published in 2000. And this pattern language was actually written by Mike, Ken, and Jeff. Then a guy, Jonat Sharon, he's not there, I don't know. And a woman, Martine de Vos, a Belgian lady. I know her pretty well, actually, but for whatever reason, she's not there, right? And again, maybe she couldn't make it. I really don't know. I never asked. I should have probably, but yeah. And then there are a few other people who, well, kind of naturally should have been there. Well, one is, Dipti, you asked kind of already about her, which is Mary Poppendiek. However, I'm also not 100% sure. She might also come in just in 2001 into the game, so she might have been a bit late, but I'm sure she was around already. And then, of course, also people like Rebecca Brooks-Brock, because she was also in analysis and design part, and also worked with some of the other people, like with Ward already, with like on the CRC cards, which was the kind of led into the stories later on. So the way how we, at least how we know it in XP, that we write the stories on a card, and then the backlog was a pile of cards. And this is kind of the thing that she used already also at that time, and she should have been there as well. And from her, I believe she wasn't invited, and I don't know why. So, and probably if you dig deeper, there are really a few others which is kind of, well, we don't really know. The interesting thing is also that even inside the US, it's not very widely spread. So there are like 2-3 hubs where the people are coming from. However, on the other hand, we also know that in the way how we are working together, maybe most of you are now from, I just make a guess, maybe around Delhi and the other part around Bangalore or so. So there are like different hubs, and this is then how we connect, and that's then the reason why it happens that way. And also remember, it's really long ago, and so also social media and so on wasn't the way we know it right now. So it's also excusing them a little bit. Yeah, maybe that's the time for me to look at the questions. And
Do you want
yeah,
to read them for you?
where,
Do you want me to quickly read them for you?
yes, maybe, yeah, then I don't have to search for them. That's good.
The first one is, will Agile be useful for COVID times?
Huh. Well, I don't know if it's the, well, I guess my real answer is I don't think that Agile is going away anytime soon, no matter if there are COVID times or not. I think this is more my answer. So it on the one hand, the way I see it in general, COVID has really told us what we have always talked about. Like also myself, I know I talk a lot about, well, we need all that because of we are living in a VUCA time. So the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous times, and it's just hard to plan something ahead because things will change quickly. However, most often when I talk to people, they nod, but they don't really know what it means and how are they really affected, and is it really that bad? It's just, but now with COVID, it's really starting with, well, whatever plans have been made in terms of product development, or what will we finance over the years, or how does our budget looks, and so on. So this was gone in March. And people spend, I don't know, endless hours putting those budgets and plans together, and they all fell apart. And maybe that's kind of the driver for Agile, then that people now really see it. So there's hardly anything more obvious, because in other times we were more often saying, okay, remember there's Airbnb and there's Uber and there's like all these disruptive companies that kind of shaking up a lot of the known industry. However, now with COVID, it's even to the extreme, I would say. Yeah.
So that was the question from Priya. Taking up to the next, which is from I missed out the name, but she's asking what happens when we want to, yeah, Tanvi. So she's, as lean is used in manufacturing, can we apply Agile to manufacturing or production? If not, then what would be the reason?
Okay, so I have used actually Agile in manufacturing, and it is possible, and I started doing so. This is probably also at least 10 years ago, and at the time people were, when they were looking in manufacturing, then they were looking into lean. However, that company I was working with, I started working with them in the software department, and then the people from the hardware department said, well, we actually think we would benefit from that. And I I kind of said, well, I don't know, we can try. I've never done it, but we tried and we set it up, and we started with a retrospective, like what has worked for them before, and if they want to follow more the values principles of Agile, what they think they could do, and so on. And so we found a few things that really work really well, which is thinking of cross-functional teams seems to be, at least as I know in hardware, really a kind of a new concept. They very often work even more in silos than we do in software. And so this helped them a lot. Another thing that helped them a lot, surprisingly, was having regular retrospectives. And the third thing that also helped them was actually kind of deciding upfront where they want to be in a week or two, and then also following through, because also for them, like we also know it in software very often, that there are other things coming up all the time and they can't keep the focus. But by promising this is what we deliver in like a week or two, it was much easier for them to keep their focus. And so that were the three things that really were much better. However, what you cannot really expect, well, cannot is not really true. It depends on the engineering part you are in. At least there, and also some other companies, which is finding a way to have something that's workable and can be used by a client like every 2 weeks or so, or maybe thinking of DevOps even every day or something like that. So this is really hard to get going. On the other hand, there are some examples where this was also possible to make it happen, like Wikispeed is one of the examples. However, yeah, it's there. Things are working differently, but still, again, so this client with the three things that I mentioned, they were really happy about that. So it helped them a great deal.
Wonderful. So there is a question which is in continuation. And so guys, to all of you, to dear wonderful participants, I am clubbing the questions. And so don't feel your question will be left out. So then there was another question which was from Padma Priya and Priya Patra, why there is no woman in the panel, which we have already answered. So I'm just counting that question. Now the next question, and which is coming out, is how is lean and agile different? How they came, like if we look at background of agile, it actually comes from lean. Everything that it is talking about is, mostly lean, how to go lean, how to go lightweight, how to remove waste, how to improve continuously. So then how is it different? Or how is it, coming together? And in continuation to that question, the other part is, what is the difference between agile and lean agile?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So first of all, I disagree a bit. So, and I thought I mentioned that. So lean really came in later. So XP, when it was created, the people didn't know about lean. So, and the way it was created is still at the core the way it is right now. So I wouldn't say that lean is really part of that. However, the lean ideas made it into Agile at a later point in time, and people saw that there are things that are similar, and that kind of there are similar principles, values behind that, and that people can benefit from each other. So that's kind of that part of it. Well, nowadays, probably the difference isn't really that big in the way we understand it, because no matter what we are looking at, we are looking more into what can we do in order to get feedback as quickly as possible on everything we are doing, which was always at the core of Agile, actually. However, now with CI, CD, DevOps, so everything kind of which make things more lean, and looking at like value stream analysis, finding out the waste and so on. However, this is all still focusing on getting feedback as quickly as possible. And the feedback is about the product we are developing. So for example, from the client or user point of view, but also feedback from, oh, does it even compile? Can we build the product? And also, is the technology we are using really helping us here? Or maybe we need to switch to a different technology? And how did we understand the market? And also, how well do we actually work together? So, and do we need to change their thing? Do we have waste in our way of working? So again, it's all, for me at least, coming down to this: what can we do in order to get more frequent feedback to get better?
Lean also speaks about the same. I mean,
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, right. So the principles, values are really overlapping, but it has not been created together. And actually, the interesting thing, I have to admit, that's also a few years ago when I've been to Japan. I also talked to people at Toyota, and interestingly, at the time, they had no clue that what they're doing in engineering, that they could do that in software. So they used Waterfall in software in the classic way.
So I recall a video where you and Ray were there. Is this the same time you guys went to? Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Peter. There will be endless questions. I really don't want to totally drain you out. And I can't tell you how awesome this conversation was. This was exactly I was looking forward to. You have done such a brilliant, a compilation of entire history that we needed. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Great fun.
We would further love to learn from you about Agile Bossa Nova, where we'll start talking about how to go Agile for organizations. And I hope you can take some time out for us then.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah.